My beloved child, do not move past this moment too quickly. Something has been waiting for you at the edge of this night, something your heart may have sensed before your mind could ever understand it. Pause here. There is a reason these words have reached you now, when so much has been shifting beneath the surface. What you are about to hear is not a message of fear, and it is not meant to make you chase what is uncertain. It is a fictional spiritual message of revelation, courage, and truth, and within this story, heaven is drawing back a curtain that has remained closed for far too long. Your soulmate has been carrying something in silence, something they have tried to bury beneath ordinary conversations, unfinished sentences, distracted smiles, and moments when they seem to disappear into their own thoughts. But tonight, that silence is beginning to crack. Tonight, something they have hidden from you is finally becoming too heavy for them to carry alone. You may have wondered why their energy changed without explanation. You may have felt moments when they seemed close enough to speak from the deepest part of their heart, only to retreat at the final second. You may have replayed certain memories, wondering whether there was something you missed, some invisible sentence written between the words they actually gave you. And in this story, there was. But listen carefully, because the secret is not what you first think. It is not simply about another person. It is not merely about a mistake, a hidden conversation, or some ordinary confession. What they have been hiding reaches much deeper than that. It touches the reason they became distant when they wanted to come closer. It touches the reason they sometimes acted as though they did not care when caring was exactly what frightened them. It touches the moment they realized that meeting you had awakened something inside them they were not prepared to face. There was a night, not so long ago, when your soulmate sat alone with a truth they could no longer avoid. The room around them was quiet, but their thoughts were not. They had spent so much time convincing themselves they could control what they felt. They believed distance would make everything easier. They believed silence would protect them. They believed if they waited long enough, the intensity of what they carried for you would eventually become smaller. But something unexpected happened. The more they tried to push it away, the louder it became. Your absence did not erase the feeling. Your silence did not make them forget. And every time they attempted to move forward without acknowledging what was in their heart, something within them pulled them back toward the truth. They remembered a moment with you that seemed insignificant when it happened. Perhaps it was something you said without realizing how deeply it landed. Perhaps it was the way you looked at them when they expected judgment but received understanding instead. Perhaps you showed kindness during a moment when they had already decided the world was incapable of seeing them gently. Whatever the moment was, it stayed. It followed them into quiet evenings. It returned during songs, familiar places, unexpected memories, and those strange hours when the mind grows tired of pretending. They began to understand that what frightened them about you was not that you had harmed them. It was that you had seen something in them they had worked very hard to hide. And this is where the secret begins. Your soulmate has been carrying a version of themselves they have never fully shown you. Not because everything about them has been false, but because they learned long ago that revealing too much could cost them something. They became skilled at appearing stronger than they felt. They learned how to smile before anyone could ask what hurt. They learned how to walk away before anyone had the chance to leave them. They learned how to keep their deepest hopes hidden beneath practicality, humor, distance, or silence. And then you came into their life and disrupted that pattern without even trying. Somehow, around you, the mask stopped fitting as comfortably as it once did. There is a reason they have been difficult to read. One day they seemed certain. The next, they seemed unreachable. One moment there was warmth between you that felt impossible to deny, and then suddenly there was a wall. You wondered if you imagined the connection. You wondered if perhaps they had changed their mind. But the deeper truth within this fictional revelation is more complicated. They were not only running from you. They were running from the person they became when they allowed themselves to care about you. Because that person was vulnerable. That person wanted something real. That person could no longer pretend that emotional safety meant never needing anyone. And tonight, they are tired of running from that person. There is something sitting unfinished in their mind right now, words they have rehearsed more than once. They have imagined how you might react. They have imagined your silence after hearing it. They have imagined you becoming angry, confused, emotional, or perhaps simply staring at them because suddenly so many confusing pieces would begin to make sense. They have considered saying nothing. They have told themselves that maybe the past should remain buried. But each time they decide to keep the secret, something inside them refuses to settle. The truth keeps returning. You should understand this. The secret is not powerful because of what happened. It is powerful because of why they hid it. There was a choice they made earlier in this connection, perhaps before you even knew how deeply they cared. At a crucial moment, instead of following their heart, they listened to fear. Someone may have offered advice. Circumstances may have pressured them. Their own past may have whispered that loving you would eventually hurt. And because they trusted fear more than hope, they made a decision that changed the direction of everything between you. They never told you. You only experienced the consequences. You felt the distance without knowing what created it. You felt the hesitation without knowing what conversation had happened behind it. You felt the energy shift but were never given the explanation. And because human hearts naturally try to make sense of silence, you may have blamed yourself for pieces of the story that were never yours to carry. But there is more. The decision they made did not bring them the peace they expected. In fact, it did the opposite. At first they told themselves they had done the sensible thing. They tried to focus on everything except you. They tried to become busy. They tried to behave normally around people who knew nothing about the storm beneath their calm expression. But then something happened that they did not anticipate. Life continued, yet the question remained, what if I walked away from something I was meant to understand rather than escape? That question became harder to ignore. They began noticing the difference between connections that merely filled time and the connection that had challenged them to become emotionally honest. They began realizing that what they called peace was sometimes only avoidance. They began seeing how many decisions in their life had been made from the fear of disappointment. And slowly, painfully, your soulmate arrived at a realization they could no longer deny. Losing the possibility of you had not made them feel safer. It had made them feel unfinished. This was the first part of the secret. But not the deepest part. Because while they were struggling with this realization, something else occurred. Someone asked them about you. It may have been casual. It may have been someone close to them who noticed the way their expression changed when your name entered the conversation. Perhaps that person asked a simple question: why don't you just tell them the truth? Your soulmate did not answer immediately. That silence said more than words could have. Because the truth they were hiding was no longer simply about a past choice. By then, it had become a confession about the present. They still cared. More deeply than they wanted anyone to know. And that realization frightened them because they had spent so much time building the appearance that they had moved on, recovered, detached, forgotten, or accepted whatever distance existed between you. They had created a story that made them seem unaffected. Perhaps even people close to them believed it. But beneath that story, your soulmate had been carrying moments of regret that arrived without warning. They wondered where you were. They wondered whether you had stopped thinking about them. They wondered if someone else had learned how to appreciate the parts of you they once took for granted. They wondered whether they had waited too long. Then one evening, something changed. They came across a reminder of you they were not expecting. Maybe it was an old message. Maybe a photograph. Maybe a phrase you used to say. Maybe your name appeared somewhere so unexpectedly that for 1 second, everything around them seemed to disappear. They stared longer than they intended. And within that silence, the emotional wall they had built began to weaken. They remembered not only what happened between you, but who they were before fear took over. They remembered how alive certain conversations made them feel. They remembered the strange sense of recognition they could never explain. They remembered how you challenged them without forcing them. They remembered how your presence made them think about a future they had previously trained themselves not to want. And for the first time, they admitted something privately that they had refused to say aloud: I did not leave because I felt nothing. I pulled away because I felt too much, and I did not know what to do with it. That admission changed everything. My child, keep listening, because the next part is where the hidden truth becomes even more important. Your soulmate did not only hide their feelings from you. They also hid a fear connected to their past. There is something they experienced before you that shaped the way they responded to closeness. Maybe someone once promised permanence and disappeared. Maybe trust was broken. Maybe they watched love turn into disappointment so many times that they stopped believing vulnerability could be safe. Whatever the exact story, they carried its shadow into your connection. You were speaking to the person in front of you, but sometimes they were reacting to someone who was no longer there. A delay from you could awaken an old abandonment. A difficult conversation could remind them of another relationship. A moment of uncertainty could become evidence, in their mind, that history was about to repeat itself. And rather than tell you, I am afraid, they became distant. Rather than say, please reassure me, they acted indifferent. Rather than admit, you matter enough to hurt me, they sometimes behaved as if none of it mattered. This is why certain moments may have felt confusing. But heaven, within this story, is not revealing this so you excuse every action. Love without accountability becomes another form of confusion. Compassion does not require you to abandon your boundaries. Understanding someone's wounds does not mean accepting behavior that wounds you. The revelation is meant to show you that what happened may have had layers you could not see, not to tell you that you must accept anything your heart knows is unhealthy. And strangely, your soulmate is beginning to understand this too. That may be the most important change of all. They are not preparing to tell you the secret simply because they miss you. They are beginning to see that if they ever want a different outcome, they must become a different participant in the story. They cannot ask for trust while withholding truth. They cannot ask for closeness while punishing vulnerability. They cannot hope for a new chapter while hiding the pages that shaped the old one. So tonight, they are facing a choice. Speak, or remain trapped inside the story they created. And something inside them has begun choosing truth. There is a message forming. Perhaps not literally on a phone yet, perhaps not in the exact way your imagination expects, but within this cinematic story, the decision is becoming real. They have mentally started the conversation again and again. There is something I should have told you. Then they stop. Another version, you probably think I did not care, but that is not what happened. Another pause. Then the words become more honest. I was scared, and I made a decision because of that fear. But even this is not the entire confession. There is one sentence they are afraid to say more than all the others. Because once they say it, they cannot return to pretending. Once they say it, you will understand why their silence carried so much tension. Once they say it, everything you thought you knew about the distance between you may need to be reconsidered. And no, the sentence is not merely, I love you. It is something attached to that feeling. Something about a moment you never knew happened. A moment when your soulmate almost changed everything. There was a time when they were much closer to reaching out than you realized. Perhaps you were living your ordinary life, thinking they had forgotten you. Perhaps you were grieving the silence. Perhaps you had finally begun convincing yourself to stop hoping. And meanwhile, somewhere beyond your awareness, your soulmate had already decided to contact you. They wrote something. They did not send it. This hidden message became one of the secrets they carried. It was longer than they intended. More vulnerable than anything they had ever said to you. In it, they admitted things they had concealed. They admitted that they thought about you more often than they should. They admitted that they regretted how certain things ended. They admitted that they wished they had been braver. They admitted that some nights they wondered whether the connection between you had arrived at the wrong time, or perhaps at exactly the right time, and they had simply failed to recognize it. Their finger hovered over the final step. And then fear returned. They deleted part of it. Then more. Then all of it. You never knew. But they remembered every word. And that moment has haunted them because it became symbolic of everything they had been doing. Approaching truth, then retreating before truth could change their life. Tonight feels different. Why? Because something happened recently that made them realize time does not stop simply because a person is afraid. They heard something. Saw something. Understood something. Maybe it was not dramatic from the outside. Maybe it was as simple as realizing you were changing, growing, becoming stronger, or creating a life that might someday no longer leave room for unresolved people. And for the first time, they were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth: you are not guaranteed to remain emotionally available while they decide whether to become honest. That realization shook them. They understood that silence also makes decisions. Avoidance also creates endings. Waiting too long can become an answer even when no answer was spoken. And suddenly the fear of telling you the truth became smaller than the fear of never telling you at all. This is why the energy of tonight feels urgent in this story. Not because you must rush. Not because you should abandon your peace and wait beside a phone. But because, within your soulmate's emotional world, something is reaching a breaking point. A pattern is losing its power. A secret is becoming harder to protect. A person who once believed silence was safety is beginning to discover that silence can become its own kind of prison. And there is another layer you need to know. The secret involves something they misunderstood about you. For a long time, your soulmate believed something that was not completely true. Perhaps they thought you had already stopped caring. Perhaps they misread your silence. Perhaps they assumed your strength meant indifference. Perhaps someone gave them incomplete information, or perhaps their own insecurities filled the gaps in ways that hurt both of you. They formed a conclusion. That conclusion influenced their choices. But recently, they discovered something that challenged it. This is the revelation they were not prepared for. They realized you may have been protecting your heart rather than rejecting them. They realized your distance may not have meant you felt nothing. They realized the moment they interpreted as your final answer may have been something else entirely. And suddenly they were forced to ask themselves the question they had avoided for far too long. What if I misunderstood them, and then built everything that happened afterward on that misunderstanding? That question has been echoing inside them. Because if they were wrong, then some of the pain between you was never inevitable. It was created by two people protecting themselves at the same time. Two hearts waiting for certainty. Two people interpreting silence. Two people afraid to be the first to reveal too much. And in that realization, your soulmate felt something that was difficult to name, a mixture of hope and regret. Hope, because perhaps the story was not what they believed. Regret, because they understood how much time fear had already taken. But the greatest secret is still ahead. Your soulmate has also been hiding a decision. Not the old decision that created distance. A new one. One they made recently. And this is the part almost no one around them knows. They have decided that if they get the opportunity to speak honestly with you, they do not want to repeat the old pattern. They want to tell you what happened. They want to explain the moment they pulled away. They want to admit what fear controlled them. They want to tell you about the message they never sent. They want to reveal the misunderstanding they carried. And most importantly, they want to ask one question they have been afraid to ask. But before I reveal that question, you must understand why it matters so deeply. Your soulmate is no longer only wondering how you feel about them. They are wondering whether they have become the kind of person who could finally meet you honestly. That is different. There was a time when they wanted reassurance without transformation. They wanted certainty without vulnerability. They wanted to know you would remain before they risked showing you their full heart. Now they are beginning to understand that love does not work that way. Someone has to become brave before certainty arrives. Someone has to speak while the answer is still unknown. Someone has to risk hearing the truth. And for perhaps the first time, they are preparing themselves to do exactly that. Tonight, in this story, they sit with the possibility that you may not respond the way they hope. They know you have changed. They know you have every right to protect the peace you built during their silence. They know their confession does not automatically erase the past. They know that telling the truth late does not make the delay disappear. And strangely, this awareness has not stopped them. It has made the confession more sincere. Because now they are not approaching you to control the outcome. They are approaching the truth because hiding from it has become impossible. There is something sacred about that kind of honesty, even when it arrives imperfectly. You may be wondering what you should do if this story mirrors something in your own heart. Do not chase. Do not force. Do not create evidence where none exists. Let real people prove real intentions through real actions. This message is a fictional spiritual narrative, and its deeper lesson is not that you must wait for someone. It is that truth, when it finally arrives, should meet a heart that remembers its own value. Your soulmate's confession, however emotional, does not decide your worth. You were worthy before they understood you. You were worthy while they were confused. You were worthy during the silence. And you will remain worthy regardless of what anyone chooses. Perhaps this is why the truth could not arrive earlier in the story. Perhaps you first needed to become strong enough to hear it without losing yourself inside it. Perhaps there was a version of you who would have accepted any explanation simply because you missed them. But now something is different. Now you know that love should not require you to disappear from your own life. Now you understand that destiny without honesty is only fantasy. Now you understand that connection must eventually become action if it is meant to become something real. And this is exactly what makes tonight so important. Your soulmate is not only preparing to tell you what they hid. They are preparing to discover who you have become while they were hiding it. That thought both frightens and fascinates them. They wonder whether your eyes will still soften when you hear their voice. They wonder whether you will recognize the person beneath the defenses. They wonder whether you will allow them to explain. They wonder whether there is still a door somewhere, even if it is only open enough for one honest conversation. And then comes the question they have rehearsed privately. The one they have been afraid to ask. It begins simply. If I told you the real reason. They stop. Try again. If I told you why I actually walked away. Another pause. Because the rest of the sentence changes everything. If I told you the real reason I walked away, would you still believe there could have been something between us? That is the question. But there is still one final secret underneath it. Because the real reason is not only fear. It is connected to something they were told about you. Something they believed. Something that influenced everything. And now they have discovered that what they were told may not have been true. This is why they cannot remain silent anymore. Someone from the past has resurfaced in their thoughts, not necessarily in their life, but in the chain of events that led to the distance between you. Your soulmate remembers a conversation that took place when emotions were already fragile. A conversation you never heard. A warning. An assumption. A sentence that planted doubt at exactly the wrong time. For months, perhaps longer, they accepted that sentence as truth. Recently, something exposed the weakness in that story. A detail did not match. A memory suddenly looked different. Something someone said contradicted what they had believed. And now your soulmate has begun retracing everything. That is what they have really been doing in silence. Not forgetting you. Reconstructing the past. They have been revisiting moments one by one, realizing that what they thought was obvious may have been distorted by fear, timing, and incomplete information. And with every piece they reconsider, the same unsettling realization grows stronger. They may have walked away from you because of something that was never true. Tonight, they want to tell you who said it. They want to tell you what they heard. They want to tell you why they believed it. They want to tell you what they recently discovered. But even now, there is one part of the story they have not fully admitted to themselves. Because the person who planted the doubt was not a stranger. It was someone whose opinion they trusted deeply. Someone who knew enough about the situation to sound convincing. Someone who may have believed they were protecting your soulmate. And when your soulmate finally reveals what this person said about you, you may understand why everything changed so suddenly. But what they discovered afterward is even more extraordinary. Because the same person who once planted the doubt has recently admitted something your soulmate never expected to hear. Something about you. Something about that old conversation. Something that has forced your soulmate to question every choice they made afterward. And tonight, with the confession sitting heavily on their heart, your soulmate finally knows they cannot tell you only half the truth. If they speak, they must tell you all of it. They must tell you what was said. They must tell you who said it. They must tell you what they believed. And they must tell you the one thing that person finally confessed about you that changed everything. Because that confession is the real secret your soulmate has been hiding. And it begins with the words, "I should never have told you to stay away from them, because what I knew about them was."